If you think money gives you control over your life, listen carefully, because the most dangerous moment for a powerful man is the moment he realizes he can't buy his way out of a choice. Elias Hartman didn't become a billionaire by accident. He became one by refusing to slow down, even when slowing down was the only thing that could have saved him. On the night this story truly begins, Elias stood alone in his penthouse, 47 floors above the city. Glass walls, lights blinking like obedient stars. A room designed to impress people who were never there. He loosened his tie, checked his phone. Nothing. No names that felt human, just numbers, notifications, in silence. That silence was new to him, and it scared him more than failure ever did. Because silence meant there was no one left to disappoint. Elias grew up believing one thing, that poverty was the original sin. His father worked himself into exhaustion. His mother learned how to stretch meals without complaining. Love in that house existed, but it was quiet, tired, always waiting for someday. Elias decided early that he would never wait. At 23, he met Mara. She was studying community development, talking about impact, about people. Elias talked about leverage, about systems, about escape velocity. They balanced each other. At first, their apartment was small, but alive. Music in the mornings, conversations that didn't need conclusions. Mara believed in time. Elias believed in acceleration. The first crack appeared disguised as opportunity. A job offer, a fast-track role, a future that promised certainty. Elias said, 1 year and we're free. Mara asked quietly, free to do what? Elias didn't answer, because he didn't know. That year taught him something dangerous, that the world rewarded absence. The more unavailable he became, the more valuable people said he was. Calls came late, flights came early, excuses became routine. Mara adapted, until she didn't. The night she left, there was no shouting. Just a calm he mistook for understanding. She placed the keys on the table. I don't want a future I have to beg for, she said. Elias hugged her. Too briefly, too confidently. He believed time would soften everything. It always had before. What followed was a decade of victory. Startups, buyouts, public praise. Elias learned how to command rooms, how to interrupt without apologizing, how to smile without warmth. People laughed harder when he entered, left quicker when he exited. He called it respect. By 40, Elias Hartman had become a symbol. But symbols don't get lonely, men do. And Elias avoided loneliness the way he avoided rest. He dated models, attended galas, collected admiration like armor, but at night, he stared at ceilings he didn't recognize and wondered why success felt like standing on a moving train, always arriving somewhere, never being anywhere. Then came the letter, handwritten, unexpected. Mara's handwriting hadn't changed. That alone unsettled him.
She wrote about her life, simple things, gardens, laughter, purpose. Then the sentence that cracked his composure. I'm sick, terminal, 2 years, maybe less. She didn't ask for money, didn't mention the past. She asked for presence, "Just come," she wrote. Elias folded the letter carefully, placed it on his desk, and stared at the city like it could answer for him. That same week, his company reached its peak, a historic merger. His face on every screen. People called it legacy. The board called it non-negotiable. Elias called it inevitable. But inevitability is comforting until it demands sacrifice. He flew to see Mara, without announcing it, without protection. The town was small, the air slower. Mara looked thinner, but peaceful. That terrified him, because peace had never chosen him. They talked about memories, about nothing urgent. Elias felt time stretching in uncomfortable ways. He stayed longer than planned, and every extra day made returning harder. Back in the city, pressure mounted. Executives whispered. Investors demanded reassurance.
Leadership requires presence, they said. Elias had built a machine that only worked if he fed it himself, and now it was hungry. Mara noticed the tension. "You're fighting yourself," she said. Elias laughed. He didn't know how else to respond. Then came the ultimatum. Return now or lose everything. Elias sat in a hotel room, the letter on one side of the table, the contract on the other. Love or legacy? For the first time, neither option felt safe. He chose legacy. At first, he returned to the city. Meetings resumed, stock stabilized, but something in him fractured. Mara's health declined faster than expected. Elias missed calls, missed updates, missed moments that could never be scheduled again. One night, during a celebration dinner, his phone vibrated. Hospital. Elias stood up, mid-toast, left without explanation. The room kept applauding. He arrived too late.
Not for death, but for truth. Mara was weak, but clear. "I didn't want you to choose," she whispered. "I wanted you to see who you became." Elias broke, not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. That night, he made a decision that shocked everyone. He stepped down, sold his shares, walked away from the machine he spent his life building. The media called it madness. Analysts called it fear. Elias called it honesty. The final months were quiet. Hospitals, porches, sunsets that didn't need witnesses. Mara passed away holding his hand. "You finally stopped running," she said. Years later, people still ask about Elias Hartman. Some say he vanished. Others say he failed. But those who truly know this. He learned too late that legacy without love is just noise that outlives you. And the hardest choice isn't between success and failure. It's between becoming someone the world applauds or someone you can live with when the applause ends. And if this story unsettled you, good. Because the question isn't what Elias chose. It's what you're choosing right now without even realizing it. The city welcomed Elias back the way it always did. With urgency. Meetings stacked on meetings. Apologies disguised as praise. People pretending nothing had shifted, even though everyone could feel it. Elias walked through his headquarters like a man returning to a house after a fire. Everything still standing, but scorched in places no one talked about. He took his seat at the long table. Glass, steel,
reflections everywhere. Men and women waited for his signal to speak. He gave it. Numbers flew, forecasts rose, confidence filled the room. On paper, he was winning again. Inside, something else was happening. Elias couldn't listen the way he used to. Words blurred. Every projection reminded him of time passing somewhere else. His phone stayed face down. He told himself it was discipline. It felt more like cowardice. That night, alone in the penthouse, he poured a drink he didn't want. The city glowed beneath him, millions of lives moving, none of them slowing down for his dilemma. His phone buzzed. Hospital update. Mara had been admitted earlier than expected. Elias read the message twice, then a third time. He didn't reply, not because he didn't care, but because caring now meant choosing again. The board began watching him more closely. Subtle at first, a delayed approval here, an extra check-in there. Power, Elias knew, was tolerated until it became unpredictable. They needed certainty. Elias had become a variable. He flew out again. Short visit, he promised himself. Just enough to ease the guilt. Mara looked weaker, but her eyes still searched his face. "You look tired," she said. Elias smiled. He always smiled. They talked about trivial things. He avoided the future, avoided the past, avoided the space where truth lived. Mara didn't push. She had learned that love didn't beg anymore. Back in the city, the pressure turned sharp. A leaked rumor, a journalist sniffing around, investors asking about succession. Elias was no longer the untouchable constant. He was a risk, and risks get managed. One night, he stayed late in the office. Everyone else gone. Just him in the echo of ambition. He stared at an old photo on his desk. Him and Mara, before everything. He couldn't remember what he was thinking in that moment, only that he hadn't imagined losing her. The call came at 3:17 a.m. Mara's condition had worsened. The doctor didn't sugarcoat it. Days, maybe weeks. Elias sat on the edge of his bed, suit jacket still on, tie loosened. The city outside didn't pause. He did. For the first time in years, he did nothing. The next morning, he skipped the meeting that mattered most. Phones rang, voicemails stacked, the board convened without him. Elias was on a plane. Again. This time, he didn't promise himself anything. Mara was asleep when he arrived. Machines hummed softly. Elias sat beside her, held her hand, and realized something devastating. This was what he'd been postponing his entire life. Presence. When Mara awoke, she didn't smile right away. She studied him. "You came back," she said. Elias nodded. "I don't know how to do this halfway," he admitted. Mara closed her eyes. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. The ultimatum arrived that evening, official this time. Return immediately or be removed. Elias stared at the message, years of sacrifice condensed into a single paragraph. He imagined the headlines, the disappointment, the relief of those who waited for him to stumble. And then he imagined another empty room, another apology written too late. He didn't respond. Not yet. He stayed. Sat with Mara. Watched the sun lower itself without urgency. And for the first time, Elias Hartman understood the true cost of delay. Not money, not reputation, but moments that never rescheduled themselves. That night, Mara spoke again. "You don't owe me this," she said. Elias swallowed. "I owe myself," he replied. And that was when he knew. The real choice wasn't coming. It had already arrived. The breaking point didn't arrive with shouting. It arrived quietly. In the morning, Elias was standing by the hospital window, watching nurses change shifts like nothing in the world was ending. His phone vibrated again. Board chair. One missed call. Then another. Then a message. Formal. Cold. They had voted. Not to remove him, but to prepare for it. A contingency plan. A successor. A future where Elias Hartman was no longer essential. That was the moment something inside him cracked. Not because he was losing power, but because he realized power had already moved on without him. He walked down the corridor slowly. Each step felt heavier than the last. This place didn't care who he was. No assistance, no privilege. Just a man walking toward a room where time was running out. Mara was awake, her breathing shallow, her eyes searching. "You look different," she said softly. Elias sat. "I think I stayed too long away," he replied. She nodded. No accusation. No relief. Just understanding. That afternoon, Elias took a call he had avoided his entire life. His father. They hadn't spoken in years. The voice on the other end was older now. Slower. "I saw the news," his father said. Elias waited. "I worked my whole life so you wouldn't have to choose like this," the man continued. "And somehow," he added, "you ended up with the same choice anyway." Elias ended the call without knowing what to say. For the first time, success didn't feel inherited. It felt repeated. Back at the hospital, the doctor was honest. No optimism, no timelines, just truth. Elias stood there, nodding like he was listening. But inside, his mind replayed every delayed decision, every later, every moment he assumed time would forgive him. That evening, the board sent another message, a deadline. Sign the recommitment agreement or walk away permanently. No negotiation, no extensions. The document waited in his inbox like a final verdict. Elias opened his laptop. The agreement was flawless. Golden parachute, permanent recognition, a legacy protected. All he had to do was leave. Again. He closed the laptop, stood up, and did something he had never done before. He stayed offline. Minutes passed, then an hour. No responses, no statements, just absence.
And for the first time in his life, absence wasn't weakness. It was resistance. Mara's condition declined rapidly overnight. The room filled with quiet urgency. Doctors spoke in hushed tones. Elias never left her side. He missed the call that finalized everything. By morning, the decision had been made for him. He was out. News broke fast. Shockwaves rippled. Markets reacted. Commentators speculated. Some called it tragic. Others called it justice. Elias didn't watch. He was holding Mara's hand. She stirred, barely conscious. "You're here," she murmured.
"Yes," Elias said, and meant it in a way he never had before. Later that day, she opened her eyes one last time. Clear. Focused. "You chose," she whispered. Elias nodded. "No matter what happens next," she said, "don't turn this into another ambition." Elias felt the weight of that warning. Because even love could be exploited if you weren't careful. She slept and didn't wake up. Not immediately, but Elias knew something irreversible had occurred, even before the machines confirmed it. He sat there long after the room went quiet. No phone, no title, no future plan. Just a man who had finally stopped negotiating with time. Outside, the world adjusted without him. Inside, Elias Hartman faced the truth he had outrun for decades. You can recover from failure. You can rebuild after loss. But you never recover from the moment you realized what truly mattered and how close you came to losing it forever. The days after Mara's passing didn't feel real. They felt quiet. Too quiet. Elias expected grief to arrive loudly, like a collapse, like a breakdown. Instead, it came as absence. No one waiting for updates. No one needing decisions. No urgency demanding his attention. For the first time since his 20s, Elias had nowhere he was required to be. The funeral was small. No headlines, no black cars lined up in formation. Just people. Teachers. Neighbors. Children Mara had helped shape without ever making it public. They spoke about her with a warmth Elias didn't recognize. Not admiration. Affection. When it was his turn to speak, Elias stood there longer than expected. He had addressed crowds of thousands. But this room didn't want performance. I spent most of my life believing time was something you conquered, he said. His voice didn't shake. That surprised him. Mara taught me it was something you honor. He stopped there, because anything more would have sounded like apology. And apologies were for the living. After the funeral, Elias didn't return to the city. He stayed in a small house near the community center Mara loved. No assistants, no drivers,
just silence that asked questions. Who are you when no one needs your signature? The media moved on quickly. Another scandal replaced his. Another billionaire filled the vacuum. The world didn't pause for Elias Hartman. And strangely, that hurt less than he expected. He tried to rest, but rest requires permission from your own mind. Elias woke early, walked aimlessly, sat through hours with nothing to optimize. At first, he hated it. Then, slowly, he noticed things. Birdsong, morning light, conversations that didn't revolve around outcomes. One afternoon, a young man approached him.
Recognized him. "I thought you'd be different," the man said. Elias waited. "I thought powerful people were louder." Elias smiled. "So did I," he replied. Weeks passed, then months. Elias sold properties he no longer needed, donated money anonymously, not to feel noble, but because excess now felt heavy. He stopped measuring worth in numbers, because numbers had abandoned him the moment they no longer needed him. One evening, sitting on the porch, Elias reread Mara's first letter. Not the one about illness, the one from years ago. "I don't want a future I have to beg for." He finally understood what she meant. Not abandonment, alignment. Elias began speaking privately. Small rooms, closed doors. Not as a billionaire, but as a man who had lost everything he thought mattered and discovered what remained. He never told people what to choose. He just told them what choosing late costs. Someone once asked him if he missed the power. Elias thought carefully. "I miss the certainty," he said. "But certainty is the most expensive illusion there is." Years later, Elias Hartman would be remembered differently, not for the empire he built, but for the one he walked away from, for proving that legacy isn't what survives you, it's what reshapes you while you're still alive.
And this story leaves you unsettled. It should. Because the question isn't whether Elias chose love over legacy. The real question is, how long can you keep postponing what matters before the choice disappears entirely? Because one day, you won't be asked. You'll simply be answered. And by then, it will already be too late. The strange thing about losing everything at once is that the world doesn't echo the way you expect it to. There was no dramatic emptiness, just space. Elias discovered that space could be cruel if he didn't know how to sit inside it. In the early weeks, he kept reaching for his phone out of habit, not to call anyone, just to feel needed. Each time, the screen stayed still. No emergencies, no decisions waiting for approval. He had spent his life outrunning silence. Now it followed him everywhere.
He cleaned the house himself. Slowly. Drawer by drawer. Mara's things were still there. Books with folded corners. Notes scribbled in margins. Objects that meant nothing to anyone else. Elias held them longer than necessary. Not because they were valuable, but because they proved she had existed. without trying to be remembered. Some nights, grief arrived late. Not as tears, as questions. What if I had chosen earlier? What if I had stayed? What if success had waited? There were no answers. Only acceptance. The timing, once missed, never negotiates.
The community center reopened after renovations Mara had planned but never saw completed. They invited Elias, not as a donor, as a guest. He sat in the back, listened, watched children run through halls built by intention, not profit. No one mentioned his past. No one asked what he used to be. And for the first time, that felt like mercy. A woman approached him afterward, older, weathered. She believed people could change, the woman said. Elias nodded. "I'm still deciding," he replied. The woman smiled. That's usually how it starts. Time slowed. Not dramatically, just gently. Elias stopped waking up with plans. He woke up with attention. He noticed how mornings smelled different than nights, how conversations didn't need outcomes to be meaningful, how presence had a texture once you stopped rushing through it. There were invitations, panels, books, documentaries. He declined most. He wasn't interested in being admired for walking away. That would have been another performance, another disguise. But occasionally he agreed to speak. Quiet rooms, people who looked tired in familiar ways. He never gave advice. He told stories about trade-offs no one warned him about how ambition can feel like love until it demands the same sacrifices. Someone once asked him if he was happy. Elias paused longer than the room expected. "I'm honest," he said, and for the first time, that answer felt sufficient. Years passed. The world kept inventing new billionaires, new idols, new symbols of success. Elias watched from a distance, not with bitterness, with clarity. He had seen the end of that road and knew exactly what it cost. One evening, as the sun lowered itself slowly, Elias returned to the porch where Mara once sat. The chair beside him was empty, but not lonely. He spoke out loud, not to her, to himself. "I finally learned to stay," he said. The wind answered by moving through the trees. That felt right. When Elias Hartman died, quietly, years later, there were no breaking news alerts, no emergency broadcasts, just a small notice and a gathering of people who remembered him, not as a billionaire, but as a man who showed up when it mattered most. And maybe that's the real legacy. Not what bears your name, but what changes direction because you finally chose differently. Because in the end, love doesn't ask you to give up everything. It asks you to stop pretending you can afford to lose it.
If you enjoyed this story, like, comment, share, and subscribe to Golden Billionaire Stories, where every tale drips with luxury, power, and passion. Because here, love always comes with a price.